Hey all, it's been a long time coming, but finally, here is the celebratory Q&A video that I promised. Sorry, I tend to take a long time doing these things, but thanks for your patience, and I've really been looking forward to doing a more laid-back, conversational style of video. So, let's not waste too much time and get right into answering questions. Alright, so the first question is, I'm concerned if the content of Muv-Luv runs out. What other subjects do we have besides that? So I'll throw in, what future contents will you have for the audience to be informed about? Well, I can stretch out the Muv-Luv content for a while because, aside from battle and intel and lore videos, there's also, story analysis, which is something that I would like to do more. But aside from Muv-Luv, I would also like to get into 86 and Gundam. Would the beta survive in the universe of Warhammer 40k? So I don't know too much about the specifics of 40k lore, but I do know that a lot of the factions are very powerful. So, compared to the beta, at least like how we see them depicted in Muv-Luv, I think just about every faction could defeat them. Even the Imperial Guard, especially if they have like the Space Marines working with them. So I think the beta are pretty beatable. However, the thing about the beta is that they are highly adaptable, and when they are going up against the humans in Muv-Luv, they're not going at 100%, because humanity is just not as much of a threat, and so they don't need to evolve in order to defeat that threat. The only time that they really get serious about this is with the laser fort, for example, and that is just one small example of how the beta can actually reprocess technology. And so we don't know though, because the beta are only depicted, operating in a pretty low power state in Muv-Luv. Okay, ASMR when? Well, that's what the Kamchatka video is for. Alright, when's the next video coming? I know this question is a bit dated because it was before I released the last TSF video, but yeah, it'll get there when it gets there. I'm not able to release this stuff weekly or consistently because I'm a one-man show, and there's a lot of work to do for the most part. Occasionally on the Patreon videos I get some support from the people who request them, but overall, the lion's share of the work is on my shoulders, and it's just a lot to do, a lot of research and a lot of editing and writing. So I've got several in the works, Yukon base, a Gundam video that's coming out as well. So yeah, it's usually you can expect them monthly. Alright, what's your name? My name is Jonathan. Next question. Well, I don't know if it's too late to ask, but I would like to know what programs you use to edit your videos, since they look fantastic. Thanks. I use DaVinci Resolve Studio version 17. I got it for Christmas 2 years ago. It's very fun to use, but I only know how to use it at the simplest level, so I can't do any of like the fancy animation or move most of the pictures around. I can put pictures or clips in. I can do transitions, panning, zooming around, or sort of resizing things. That's about it. I mean, there's just so much to it that you can do on a professional level that I don't have the experience or the training to do it. Most of what I do is just I intuitively look at things and I'm like, okay, well, I want to make that look good. I want to make that seem interesting or cinematic or just pleasing to the eye. And so a lot of the battle videos, for example, they're just a bunch of PowerPoint slides, and I screenshot them, move the little images around on the screenshot little bit by bit, and that's about it. So yeah, but DaVinci Resolve Studio is what I use. It's very easy to use if you just want to do basic stuff like that. Also, where can I watch Muv-Luv Unlimited and the rest of the series? So, in the interest of supporting the franchise, I'd say Muv-Luv Extra and Unlimited are available in visual novel format on Steam. They're both placed in the work Muv-Luv. You should usually be able to catch it on sale every now and then. Otherwise, as far as anime goes, there is no anime adaptation of Extra or Unlimited. As a military veteran, what did you do in the military? I.e., what branch did you serve in, what unit were you in, etc. And why do you like mechs, since from civilian perspective, people from the military would consider mechs to be a waste? Just wanted to ask. I didn't really do anything interesting. You know, when I was in the Army. I was an infantryman in the, mostly, for the most part, it was the 28th Infantry Division, so we were a National Guard unit. But yeah, no, that was a time when the National Guard was deploying a lot to the Middle East, and I came in at the tail end of that. I don't think if you're in most regular Army units, I don't think you're deploying too much nowadays. But back then we were deploying like crazy, and I came in to the unit, and they had just come back from Iraq, and then we were sent on a peacekeeping mission to Egypt, which was actually really fun. After that, we were going to go back to Iraq, but then when I was in Egypt, Obama pulled everyone out of Iraq, and then ISIS was created, so everyone was like, oh, I guess we'll need to send special forces back in to help the Iraqi military. But that's when they stopped deploying guard units like en masse. But anyway, to answer the second part of your question, since this kind of ties with how I served, because being in the Guard, you're not on active duty, so you don't get access to all the training all the time. You have to take it upon yourself to keep your mind sharp, and to know your tactics and your battle drills, and to know your weapon systems, and you have to be diligent on your own time. And so for me, that meant studying, a lot of reading up, and a lot of knowing just your troop leading procedures and stuff like that. And so when you understand that, reading up on a weapon system is it's just something that I got used to. And so when it comes to TSFs and mechas and battle tactics and doctrine, Muv-Luv was able to do that in a way where I just felt like I was, back in the military again, and having to, read up on these, doctrines and these tactics that, I always used to do when I was in. So it's just the fact that it was able to do that made me have so much respect for the world building and the writing of Muv-Luv. So that's why I really love TSFs and the concepts, and the, just how realistic the design is as, a platform, and what it's capable of, what it's intended for, and all that. And, I'm also a huge fan of things like Ace Combat, which, as we all know, it's not a realistic depiction of aerial warfare, but there's something about it that sort of just resonates with reality. It doesn't, realistically depict reality. It resonates with it. And that allows you to have these, really epic and, fantastic stories while capturing the feel of, a military, capturing the feel of being a pilot of some machine without actually having to be realistic. So, what do you think of the YouTuber Arch Warhammer? I guess he's cool. I don't know too much about him personally, but I think I watched a lot of his videos, a long time ago. I think he did some on Total War Warhammer, if I'm correct. And I think he was doing a lot of lore videos on that. So I watched a lot of those, like back when it was first coming out, and that's actually what made me, far more aware of the Warhammer world. But when it comes to Warhammer, I prefer Warhammer Fantasy just because I really love fantasy genre. So yeah, I think that's what I remember of him. I guess he made a lot of very informative videos. How many main battle tanks would it take to destroy a mobile suit or TSFs with skilled pilots? Well, according to 8th MS Team, 3 Magella attack tanks were sufficient to engage 2 ground-type Gundams and disable 1 while suffering only 1 tank destroyed. They did have to retreat, though. As for against TSFs, MBTs, they've been shown fighting against TSFs in both Schwarzes Marken and the day after. And, honestly, against a TSF, all it takes is 1 shell against a TSF to take it down. So a platoon of tanks, especially with the element of surprise, could easily take out a TSF, no problem. With 4 tanks, you have 4 tries in that initial volley. Someone's gonna hit if you're firing first and you're not detected or something. But if the TSF knows you're there, it's easily going to be able to dodge tank fire and then close the distance. So if we were to take out a flight of 4 TSFs, it would probably take about 18 to 20 tanks, I'd say, just off the top of my head. They all set up in positions where they could cover one another. And I'd say each TSF can take about it can take on 4 tanks apiece, whereas the last 4 or so, they might be able to focus on helping 1 tank platoon out and then defeat the TSFs in detail by doing so. But that's all just a guess off the top of my head. I still didn't understand why Lise killed by her brother. So Lise was too far gone. I mean, she was in deep, and she was abused to like an insane degree, and she had been forced to commit crimes on their behalf as well. So her only goal was to say, hey, screw all these people, I just want Theodore and let's get out of here. And she wasn't going to ever change that goal. In fact, all that she had suffered through, all the crimes that she committed, all the abuse that she underwent, it was all so that she could, get away with Theodore. And, if she didn't accomplish that, then, in her mind, it's like, well, all of that was for nothing. She committed to her path, and Theodore had to commit to his own path. And that meant they were eventually going to fight, or else she would keep trying to kill members of the Schwarzes Marken. And it's just a representation of how the Stasi have corrupted Germany, and just the concepts of just anything that could be resembling a healthy relationship. What's your favorite arc and alternative? Definitely the Yokohama base defense. It was one of the more intense parts, and there was so much on the line because they were fighting to defend their home, and because they were directly threatened. You knew that just about anyone could die. Nobody was safe in that situation. Even those scenes of like the random TSF pilots, shouting over the radio, giving their best to fight back against the beta, you could just tell that there was a lot of fear and terror in those pilots. And it was like they had no other choice but to talk big and fight back, because they were backed up against a wall defending an impossible situation, and it really was just a crap situation. Lots of people died in that battle. It was very intense. Beta versus Brethren Moon from Dead Space. I don't know too much of the lore or physiology behind Brethren Moon. I guess from what I Google searched, it's like some sort of Cthulhu-esque necromorph. It's about the size of a moon. I mean, I don't think the beta can win unless maybe they just landed on it and started eating. I don't see what would stop them from just eating that thing, from the inside. But I don't really know if beta are susceptible to being turned into necromorphs either, so I couldn't really tell you. What do you think about the Muv-Luv Dimensions? It might give out more lore insight of the world and add more TSFs, be they canon or non-canon. Yeah, Muv-Luv Dimensions, it could have a lot of cool lore, and we might get a lot of very interesting, just like side concepts for the Muv-Luv world. So even if it's not canon, some of the things that appear might be depictions of how military operations are conducted and such, like tactics, weaponry, or factions, things that maybe never got the chance to appear in the VNs or the anime. But the big problem with Dimensions, though, is that it's only available in Japan. At least it's not available here in the US, so I can't speak definitively or anything, no matter how much I want to. What do you think of the announcement that the future of Muv-Luv as an IP depends entirely on the financial success or failure of the newly released mobile game? I think of the last answer that I gave, and English speakers like myself in the US, like, how are we supposed to support them, especially when we really want to? So I don't know. Granted, it could be a price tag issue, like making it available in the US would cost a lot more than they would gain. So from that perspective, I could understand it, but I don't really know how the whole thing works. But man, like, it sucks hearing that and then not being able to play the game and support and increase their numbers. So that kind of blows. Speaking of Muv-Luv Unlimited the day after, were you able to complete this series? Back in 2016, I could only find a bootleg English translation for episodes 0 and 1 before giving up. Yeah, I've seen all of the day after up to episode 3. All of it is currently available on Steam in English officially, so you can find it there if you look, and if you type it in a search bar or something somewhere, you'll probably find it too. What's your favorite TSF? Or maybe top 5? Okay, top 5. First is F-15E Strike Eagle. To me, it's like the Jagan of the Muv-Luv universe, and that was a sexy grunt mobile suit that I didn't really feel like it ever got the love that it deserved. But for as far as the Strike Eagle is concerned, I don't know, there's something distinctly military about the shoulders that I just love. And it's a grunt, machine that is able to hold its own and put up a decent fight. So, it doesn't exactly exist to get killed by the bad guys, even if they might take losses. The next is the F-18 Super Hornet. I mean, as a kid, I always loved the F-A-18. Maybe it was just like the image of Top Gun, they launching planes off of a carrier, and it looked really cool. So as I started watching Macross and Gundam growing up, you got to see that process as well. So when we see the TSF version of the Super Hornet getting so much time in the spotlight, and having its day of basically just shooting up a storm against the beta, it was perfection. I was like, okay, like, this is easily one of my favorite. Next is the F-22 Raptor. Kind of generic of an answer, but I mean, out of all TSFs, it has the closest appearance to what its counterpart is in real life. And the design, it screams American. Like, you're getting a healthy dose of freedom fries with it. So yeah, I'm glad to see it depicted the way it is in Muv-Luv, because it's feared but grudgingly respected, and it's got this presence to it. Fourth is the Type 94 Shiranui. This is the designated hero of Muv-Luv, so you have to give it its respect. I like the design because it strikes that perfect balance of being a grunt machine, but it's also nimble enough to be this maneuverable, heroic, hard to keep up with machine that allows it to do some pretty epic things at times. Now, lastly, I was going to put the A10 here, but that's just an honorable mention because it's a TSA. The question is about TSFs. Lastly is the F4, and that's because the F4 is it's the OG good guy, grunt. He dies a lot, but that doesn't stop him from putting up a good fight and taking down hundreds of beta in the process. And like the blocky, machine-like design is very classical tank-like mecha. So I don't know, the F4 he's like that dad that he works hard at the crappy low-paying factory job, and it takes a toll on him and his relationship and his marriage and all that, but it puts the kids through school and it sets them up for success in the future. So he takes all those L's for all the future generations of TSFs. You have to respect that. Can you rank the Gundam shows you have watched? Okay, in order from first to last, I listed it out, and here it is: Unicorn, 8th MS Team, Thunderbolt, Mobile Suit Gundam, like the original series, Zeta Gundam, Stardust Memory, War in the Pocket, Double O, Seed, Age, Wing, Iron-Blooded Orphans, Seed Destiny. I know, Iron-Blooded Orphans pretty low. I didn't like it that much. That's kind of one of my hot takes in the Gundam world. But yeah, that's the ranking. Okay, not mech, but I'm a huge fan of Legend of the Galactic Heroes. The idea suits your channel so much, and I would really love if you consider making one of their battle records. Yeah, my brother has been telling me a lot about it and trying to get me to watch it, so I definitely need to check it out, and I absolutely would consider doing like a battle record video on it. What do you think will be the future of Muv-Luv the anime? Well, one day when one of us makes billions and we can afford to spend a good amount of that money bringing the rest of the series to its rightful conclusion. Because I mentioned it before, but the arc that follows Sadogashima is, it's freaking insane. I love it so much. It's just, crazy, like intense and almost kind of horrific, and you don't know who will survive. It's exactly what people are looking for when they think of what war against the beta is like when it's up close and personal. But aside from that, I actually think that if they're able to keep the IP afloat, the Day After storyline is perfect for an anime adaptation. I mean, it's probably the most cohesive of their stories, and it follows a more familiar structure and story progression for audiences. So episode 0, it can be like a short or maybe like a 3 or 4 episode kind of thing, and then the rest of the Day After installments, those can be their own seasons. But as far as alternative, the anime, I think it's done. They don't plan to make any more, which totally blows. Like I said, it only got better from where it was, and I don't think we'll get to see it anytime soon. I wonder what happened to the Germany front in Muv-Luv. If I'm not wrong, it's now in beta control. Yes, it is. By 2001, all of Europe eventually fell. But the goal of the 666 was successful in that they were able to defend East Germany, until most of the people were evacuated. So that was always the goal, because, under the Stasi, they wouldn't have been given the choice to evacuate. Are you gonna branch out to mech games such as Armored Core or Mech Assault? I don't know too much about Mech Assault, but yeah, I definitely plan to explore Armored Core sometime. I played a lot of For Answer years ago, as well as Last Raven. So I'm excited to play 6 if I get the chance, and I definitely want to explore Armored Core. Do you have some TSF model kits? If you have, what are your thoughts about it? Also, which TSF's nation is your favorite? So I don't own any model kits, unfortunately. I'm not too great at assembling or painting them, and I don't exactly have like the biggest budget to spare, to get them. But they certainly look cool. I watch a few review channels for some of the gunpla, sometimes just to have on in the background, so it's always neat to see them. As for which TSF nation is my favorite, I'm a bit biased and generic, so I'm gonna have to go with the US, followed closely by Japan, because they have some pretty sweet designs as well. After Muv-Luv, which fandom do you want to go to next? Probably Gundam, as well as 86. I have to develop the map making skills that will let me create the same type of tactical maps that I can for fictional worlds. So until then, franchises that use Earth are easiest to do. If you could take any mech from any franchise for a test drive, no one shooting at you or trying to eat you, no obligation to save the world, just a low-stress cruise through the countryside with maybe a few drones to use for target practice, which mech would you choose and why? That's easy. One of those things from Darling in the Franxx. No reason. Just kidding. I'd say the Shiranui second, because that one, it looks cool to pilot. Apparently, according to Yuya, it has the best handling of all the TSFs he's piloted so far, and it's practically the Muv-Luv world's like Gundam at the point in which it's used. So I'd stay with TSFs because they're incredibly fast and they can cruise around for a decent while. Could you do a what if type video later in the future? Yeah, if I ever start running out of ideas for Muv-Luv or any other mech series that I do, a speculative battle record would be perfect. I'm totally down for it, but it would likely be further in the future. What do you prefer most? Where mechs take absolute center stage and are the dominant force, or where they are used in a combined arms approach with tanks, helicopters, artillery, etc.? Definitely combined arms. That's exactly why I love Muv-Luv. Compared to Gundam, I kind of just, suspend disbelief. I put up with the fact that the mecha tend to outclass just about everything and nothing is relevant in comparison. So personally, I don't like when mechs are too OP, and that's why I specifically love TSFs, because they have clear limitations which the characters have to factor in before they go around trying to fight a battle all by themselves. Gundam pilots don't often think about risk. They just, they get into a fight and they just start pushing buttons and spamming beams, and bad guys disappear. It's kind of cool, but you have to suspend a lot of disbelief for it. Like, I will happily watch, the Freedom Gundam disable entire armies. It's, it can be enjoyable to see on screen, despite how like ridiculously OP, it is. But, for me to truly love like a mecha show, I prefer to see, mecha heroics and dominance to be a difficult ordeal that, rarely happens on the battlefield, and thus that makes it much more heroic when it does. Venus. This was in response to the picture that I used when I put up the post asking for people to submit their questions, and the picture I used is of Ellen from The Day After, and she's pretty cool too. Besides Muv-Luv and Gundam, what other mech franchises are you going to cover in the future? Armored Core and 86 are what I'm currently looking at. Have you played Project Mikhail, and what do you think of it? I've been waiting for the Switch release since it was announced, but I honestly think they abandoned it. I do think they've abandoned it, sadly. I haven't played it, but I've looked at a lot of footage for it. I've also seen a lot of this fan game called TSF Forefront, which I don't know if it was still in the works or was abandoned too, but that game seemed to capture a bit more of what I'd have expected Project Mikhail to be like. Because for Mikhail, the TSF building looks awesome in that game, and it's kind of like Ace Combat, but there was, not really much of a need for it to include this almost like RPG like numbers popping up as, to indicate damage. Like it kind of made the tank class appear like bullet sponges, and that kind of action game melee combat, I'd have expected, like, you don't need to shoot more than one round into a tank class, or you don't exactly need to do the same combo of attacks, when you're using your sword. It seemed too arcadey in some regards. And when I looked at something like TSF Forefront, which tries to replicate the cockpit HUD design and everything, it seemed like it just kind of captured a little bit more of I don't know what I was looking for, but it was a fan project. But I mean, I don't know, who knows. I didn't actually play it, so somebody who has actually played Project Maykill, they might have a different opinion. Do you think Muv-Luv has the potential to become more well-known or big? Yeah, I absolutely think it has the potential to become more well-known. As far as big, that would depend on future content. Now, the original trilogy is admittedly, it's a little quite dated. It's not exactly a bad thing, but that requires people to go that extra step of understanding it. Total Eclipse, when it was written, Koki, he felt compelled to revisit some of what he explored in Alternative in order to clarify what he was getting at. So aside from thematic and narrative elements, a lot of people will look at Muv-Luv today and they'll think, oh, this is generic isekai mecha versus alien harem wish fulfillment, without ever thinking about the context of when it was written and what the deeper meaning of the romance, the isekai, and the mecha themes are, aside from how modern anime portrays and explores them. Because Muv-Luv, it kind of flips, those tropes around and shows that, Takeru, like, he really isn't much, no matter the fact that he respawns back into the timeline. He truly becomes a hero when he understands that he can't simply rely on, respawning, again and again. So when he accepts that he can't go back and undo mistakes, he has to drive forward and improve. That's kind of more of the, the powerful element of the narrative. So newer Muv-Luv works, they can put these themes into their stories, put them into perspective, say, through an anime adaptation of The Day After. And by understanding the themes of newer Muv-Luv works, which are the same as the older ones, people can revisit the older ones and understand that those themes are prevalent everywhere, all throughout. And it's not just generic aliens versus robots and, romance harem. How many rounds of ammo can a TSF carry, and where do they store them in? Is ammo, does it have a case or is it caseless? Lastly, can TSFs fly a long time at a high height or just a short time like Gundams? So a TSF, can carry up to 4 assault cannons, 2 on its rear mount pylons, and 2 in each of its hands. Each assault cannon carries 2,000 rounds of 36mm and 6 rounds of 120mm. So just by guns alone, they can potentially start off with 8,000 rounds of 36mm and 24 120mm shells. So those rounds are caseless, and most TSFs, they store their extra magazines in either their hip or their skirt armor, or in designated knee armor blocks like the US ones use. I can't recall if a specific amount of extra magazines are depicted anywhere, but some will be the 120mm mags, or others will be the 36mm. They'll at least be able to reload both guns, in their hands, at least once. So we see an F-18 doing that in The Day After. When you take that into consideration, that means, no less than 12,000 36mm rounds total, and 36 120mm total at the least. Of course, TSFs, they also can just find supply canisters and just switch out for a new gun because it's faster than reloading. 4 assault cannons is also, some militaries that not every TSF is going to sortie with 4 assault cannons at a time. So it varies. As for being airborne, yeah, TSFs, they can cruise much longer than a mobile suit can, and they're faster than attack helos, but they're slower than fighter jets. What do you think about the new mobile game Dimensions? Yeah, I want to play it. I want to support it, and I think it kind of sucks that it's not available to me in the U.S. So I guess I can only just watch and hope that it succeeds, and I guess look into getting other Muv-Luv stuff. What's your favorite TSF and why is it the Raptor? The Raptor is very cool TSF. Like I mentioned, it's got that really badass presence. But I like the F-15. It's a good grunt machine, and it puts up a good fight. Far more than the F4, but also on par with the Type 94. Maybe not better at melee, but kind of slightly cooler design in my opinion. But also the F-15 isn't the one that's able to go rush into a horde of beta and just destroy all of them at once. It still has to be a grunt working alongside other ones. So it's a perfect balance for me. What's your favorite Muv-Luv pairing? Well, that's easy. Yamamoto and Stella. For real though, probably Theodore and Iristina. I'd say Yui and Yuyo, but well, I guess we're not allowed to go there. Takeru and Maya were originally my favorite, but once they weren't, well, I can't exactly say they aren't the main couple, because technically, the love triangle isn't resolved. It actually isn't, based on how Alternative actually ended, and that final scene, how it mirrors the hot spring scene. But, throughout the course of Alternative, Maya she's not exactly the main girl. She's the noble confidant. I was so, having to make peace with that, it made me really angry, and I couldn't think about them as a couple anymore, because if I did, it would just be too heartbreaking and traumatic. But I do think that Takeru and Maya had a really good arc together, even in Alternative, they were constantly building each other up, and they struggled at first. Like when Takeru was first going through PTSD, Maya didn't exactly have the right response, and so when she next saw Takeru in a state of just emotional turmoil, she had a different approach, because she was doing her own maturing and growing on her own time, and so she refined her own process and was able to talk Takeru through his next issues with involving Sumika. So just all the times that they work together, not even on the battlefield, they're they're wingmen, but then off of that they're constantly just improving one another. It's, to me, I'm like, well, that's what a real relationship is. So they've got it right there. But the reason I say Theo and Iristina are my favorite is because I don't know, there was just something really tragic and beautiful about how so apparently, I think in the light novel and the visual novel, it's made clear that around Operation Neptune, when they're fighting in Poland, that's when Theo really truly acknowledges that he has feelings for Iristina, and he kind of comes to the conclusion that, well, it doesn't make sense to sort of confess to her when she's there's a lot going on, and she's basically trying to take down the Stasi and help Germany. So why am I going to add on to her plate? So he decides not to confess to her, essentially wants to wait for a better time, and instead decides, I'm gonna help her fight for her cause. And it's really clear how much she actually relies on him. I think that in the visual novel route, if you don't pick her route, then she she isn't able to be as, heroic as she's, meant to be. And so with Theodore at her side, she's able to live up and, fulfill, her goals because of his support. So they gel really well together. And of course, after they accomplish their goals of, freeing Germany, that's when, Theodore has the opportunity to confess. And it just so happens to be also when Iristina is mortally wounded, accomplishing, her mission. So that final scene between them where, it kind of is a callback to that moment where Theodore is thinking there's so much, of a burden on her shoulders. I don't want to add to it by confessing. Now that burden's not there. Now he can confess, but obviously it's too late. And, even in the anime where they have that scene where the sun is rising over Berlin and it's that like come into the light kind of moment, her last thoughts are of peace and getting to spend time relaxing. And Theodore, his final words to her after she passes, they're very beautiful. And so because of the writing behind that, they're my favorite. It's tragic and it's sad, heartbreaking, all the good hallmarks of a love story. Okay, last question. What are your thoughts on 86's mech designs and the strategies employed by factions like the Confederacy and the Legion? Alright, so I love the 86 mechs, especially the Reagan Leaf. As for strategies, well, the Legion are brutal and they do all the brutal things that we can expect. I like the fact that, in a way they're essentially undead by all their tropes, except, they appear in robot form. So they do some pretty gruesome stuff. I especially loved Kiri and the Morpho as a villain. I mean, Kiri, he was, like, as a shepherd, he was just such a character, like, he was so iconic and he was so, like, angry. It was just, he was entertaining to watch. Meanwhile, the Confederacy, I feel like they needed to change things up. The Vanagander, as cool as he looks, he's not that guy, He's outclassed by the Luva, and he doesn't really have the support units that the Luva does. And yet, Federacy's strategy is just to go toe-to-toe with Legion units in, like, straight-up battle lines. But they can't afford to survive, that kind of war attrition. So it's pretty bad. And having the Nordlicht Squadron and faster machines like the Reagan Leaf being able to conduct, like, surgical strikes, that's exactly the doctrinal shift that they needed. So it's good that they developed that. So on top of that, it is kind of interesting how much there are similarities between 86 and Muv-Luv. I don't know if it's intentional or not. Maybe it's just like common themes, but there is that sort of having 86 be the meat shields while people live, comfortably in the rear. It's kind of similar to how the Japanese, are on the front line and the Americans are in the rear. The Reagan Leafs, striking deep into enemy territory to take out the special long range, super weapon is very similar to, laser Yag operations. And then of course, there's just the high attrition rates and the exploration of that. I don't think it's meant to be similar, but I mean, it kind of is similar, I think it's just something that I noticed as I was watching through it. Alright, so that's all the questions that I was asked, and those are my answers. It was nice just being able to sort of do a more laid back chat with you guys. I'm not really used to the sort of thing, especially when I'm just like looking at a microphone and talking to it. So, there's a lot of ums and yahs and and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I had fun doing this. So I'll see you guys later, and hopefully get right back into work and put out the next battle record.